I don't know if you're like me, but I'm a little wary of the whole chat GPT, artificial intelligence thing. Is that kind of making anybody else a little like uneasy, a little creepy maybe? But it's here to stay, and it's, we got to figure it all out. And I am grateful for people who are know more about this, like our very own Kelly Lindell, who has actually been engaging with, Kelly is like, she is the best, and she's super comfortable with tech. I mean, like, how you hear people who have a lot of money and they go, how much do you need? And they go, just a little bit more. And you look at computers, and I feel like Kelly would say, how many computers do you need, Kelly? Just maybe one more, but very comfortable in the tech world. And she's actually found some very practical ways to utilize AI and take advantage of it. And one thing that she did the other day, she forwarded me a prompt she had put into ChatGPT that I thought was fascinating. She asked it to respond to this. She said, write a paragraph explaining what a Christian church might mean when their mission statement is live out of being loved by God. Okay, here's what she got back. When a Christian church, and I almost feel like I should do it in like a C-3PO voice or something, but I think AI is probably, AI could do my voice, so we'll just go with that. When a Christian church states that its mission is to live out of being loved by God, it expresses a profound understanding of the central message of Christianity. In this context, being loved by God refers to the belief that God's love is unconditional and freely given to every individual. The mission statement encourages church members to embrace and internalize this love, allowing it to shape their lives and guide their actions. It emphasizes the transformative power of God's love, encouraging believers to cultivate a deep awareness of God's affection for them and to let that love flow through their interactions with others. By living out of this awareness, the church seeks to create a community of compassion, forgiveness, and grace, reflecting the love they have received from God and sharing it with the world around them. I mean, who needs a preacher anymore, really? Like that, I don't think I could have summarized it better than that. But, I really got stopped with the very first bit of this paragraph. I don't know if you caught it, but in the middle of this, it's talking about our vision statement, and it says it expresses a profound understanding of the central message of Christianity. So do you get what this means?
ChatGPT is a Christian.
No, even more than that, it means that artificial intelligence thinks we're profound. So maybe it's not such a bad thing after all if it's really understanding just how intelligent we are to have that as our... Anyway, but the other thing that I thought was interesting about this was, Kelly just asked it to come up with a summary, and it actually, in making that statement, it's making a value judgment about our mission statement, right? It's not saying it's shallow, it's not saying it's superficial or it's skewed or anything. It's saying it's profound, which is it's a way to talk about the value of it. And I thought that was a great lead into where we're going today, because we're shifting. We've been talking for multiple weeks about our vision statement of living out of being loved by God. And now we're pivoting a little bit, and we're going to look at New Day's core values, which we've got 7 of them. We've had them since the beginning. And we're going to, over the next several weeks, begin to unpack them a little bit. This morning is really just kind of an introduction. But I'm curious, I'm gonna put up in a minute kind of a little bit of a definition of values, but I'm curious, when you hear that word, what comes to mind for you as a definition of what values are? How would you describe that?
Core beliefs.
Core beliefs. Yeah, I need somebody.
Something you absolutely have to keep. When your house is on fire, what do you throw out the windows?
Yes. So not just in terms of an idea, but also value, like something that is prized, or because the two are really kind of linked there. Anything else comes to mind? Yeah, Claire.
I don't know if we actually all do it in practice, but I would say for me too, value is not only a core belief, but it's a core belief that guides my behavior. And I think there's a bifurcation there in many cases, which is one thing that people look at the church and they're like, you don't do what you say.
Yes, don't say much more, because you're really going where we're going here this morning. But yes, our own chat GPT right here named Claire. Really, I think this is at least how we're going to think about it here together, is that as I think about a value statement, we're considering it sort of the bridge between our vision and our action. It's going to take this from being a slogan up here to live out of being loved by God and go, okay, well, what is that? How do we actually begin to flesh that out a little bit and tie it to behavior, tie it to the choices that we make both individually and corporately as a church. And like I said, New Day has 7 core values. I'm just going to buzz through them real quickly for you at this point, just so you can get refamiliarized with them, and then we'll talk about them in the coming weeks. But here are 7 core values. First off is that worship is central. We've said that we want to recognize and respond to who God is. You know, church can do a lot of different things that other organizations can do. This is one thing that is unique to churches, is to really have worshiping God being at the core of who we are. Secondly, truth must be well told, that the gospel deserves to be communicated clearly and carefully and creatively. Third is that the church is a mission outpost, meaning we're not trying to get everybody in here to make our programs the best that they can be. Our job is to come together, encourage each other, equip one another to go back out into the world wherever you live and function on a daily basis, and say that's really where the church life happens, because number 4, every Christian is a minister. There's not a divide between paid staff and unpaid staff. Like, we are all called to be all in, and God has given you a place in life where you get to bear witness to who He is. And whether that is on your job, whether you're retired, with your family, everywhere you are called to be a minister. Fifth is that authenticity rules the day, meaning, and we're going to touch on this in a little bit here later, but we're in such a hypocrisy-sensitive culture that to strip away anything that feels artificial and fake, that people can read it, and we've got to root that out. And 6 is that the church must lead the way in love and reconciliation. Really, the one way that Christ said the world will know that we're His followers is through love, and He's given us this message of reconciliation. Scripture says both reconciliation to God and with each other. That is at the core of who we are. And then finally, and this one kind of always throws people, but the who question outranks the how question, meaning we're trying to be more about Christ and what He's done for us than how we're going to implement church, because then it quickly turns into something that's all about us. So trying to keep Him at the central. So those are really our core values. And you might look at those and go, okay, they're great, they're fine and all, but maybe it feels a little theoretical or detached from real life. And I really actually am really excited to be doing this series right now, because I think it's incredibly relevant. As I have been in conversations more and more over the last couple of years, I feel like all the things that are weighing heavily on my heart as I interact and as I listen to people out in the world, as I listen to people within the church who have a certain amount of either disdain or disillusionment with church, dissatisfaction with church, which seems to be on the rise, seems to be increasing more and more. To me, it seems like at its heart, it's really quite often rooted in values and a misalignment of values. We talked a couple weeks ago about the broken church and what do we do with that. And I think values, a values conversation is really valuable, actually. And at this point, it's been 16 years ago since David Kinnaman came out with his book called Unchristian, which he essentially was doing research on people's perception of the church, people outside the church, what they thought of us, what was it? Because he was even 16 years ago or 20 years ago when he probably started this, was looking and seeing a growing tide of negativity around the church and outer perception of it. And as he's doing this research, one respondent gave him a quote that sort of summed up what he was finding elsewhere. She said this, she said, "Most people I meet assume Christian means very conservative, entrenched in their thinking, anti-gay, anti-choice, angry, violent, illogical empire builders. They want to convert everyone, and they generally cannot live peacefully with anyone who doesn't believe what they believe." It stings a little bit, right? And maybe it feels like it makes you a little angry in response to it. But the truth is that played out, that was an accurate read on the perception. As they did this research, they found that increasingly that is the way people outside the church look at the church. So that was 16 years ago, okay? And things have progressed or digressed since then. Just the other day, Christianity Today had an article that this was the title. It said, "Conscious Uncoupling from Church is the New Temptation." And so I think we see the dissatisfaction has moved largely from just people outside observers of the church to also internally in the church. And people trying to hold on to faith while also really struggling with what's happening in church and feeling like they're trying to separate from it. And the guy who wrote this article, Matthew Bates, is a professor at Quincy University, professor of theology. And he said this, he said, "When they first enter my classroom, most of my students seem to believe that even if Christianity happens to be fully true, it doesn't really matter." That's a pretty big statement. And you go, okay, so there's no really use trying to spend a lot of energy proving to somebody the truth of Christianity if they go, well, okay, so it's true, it doesn't really matter. And I think as I'm saying this, this is not going to be a depressing message. I said this 2 weeks ago too. What I'm trying to do is establish the reality that we are living in and dealing with, and maybe some of us are even feeling and struggling with it. You know, I was talking with a pastor this last week who he's been pastoring for 40 years, and he goes, "This feels like the most challenging time for church in the whole time I've pastored." It's a real thing. There is this real dynamic going on, and we're trying to all figure out what it is that's going on. And I think to a great degree, what is at the base of it has to do with values. And one of the people who has had the greatest influence on my thinking about this topic of values is a guy named Jonathan Haidt, who isn't a Christian, but he's a social psychologist who studies morality all around the world. And he did this, we've talked about him here before as well in the last couple of years, but he basically did all this research and found that no matter where you go, culturally, time-wise, across disciplines, that pre-wired into all of us are kind of these 6 basic core values that we all find to be important. Things that it didn't matter where you are in the world. It might express itself differently in different cultures, but basically to be human is to care about these 6 things. And he listed them out like this. So we care about care. We don't want to see people harmed. We care about fairness and people not being mistreated or people not getting special treatment. We care about liberty and people not being oppressed. Loyalty is a big deal. We don't want to be betrayed. We care about authority. Even if we are fighting authority, we still all like a certain degree of order as opposed to chaos and rules to be in place for how the world functions. And then sanctity. There are certain things that are just precious and beautiful that we want to care for and protect. And so these are sort of 6 widespread, universal, internal things that we all feel to one degree or another. The thing is, though, with all 6 of those, we can't, any one of us can't seem to hold on to all 6 equally at any given time. We zero in on a couple or 3 or 1 that really matters to us the most. So this is why when I was in first grade, Mrs. Hansen calls my mom and says, "Sharon, you got to help me with Jeff. He's leading a little rebellion of tears in our class because she was trying to keep the whole class in during recess for something that one student, Dean Brown, did. And so to me, that just offended my sense of fairness so much. It didn't matter that she was the teacher and the authority, and I was normally the rule follower kid, but this really, I couldn't tolerate it, you know? So you zero in on one value. Or maybe it's your friend who is really wanting your loyalty. They've shared something with you, and you're not allowed to do anything with that information, and maybe you don't want to betray them and betray their trust, but that means it's going to be hard to care for somebody else, or it's going to mean letting go of something that you value. Or, you think about the parent who cares so much about their kid that they can't put any boundaries in place, and they can't bring themselves to put restrictions on them. So we all have these things that at any given time we might zero in on one. And I think this is really helpful because when we know that that's how we operate, really, when we get into conflicts with other people, there might be these issues up here that we're talking about, but when you really drill it down, it's because one person is emphasizing one value over another, and they get into conflict. So somebody's really about the authority of the Bible and doing what God is asking of us, and somebody over here is saying, yeah, but what about fairness and people's autonomy? And so those are the things that come into conflict. And so Jonathan Haidt says everybody has some reason for what they're doing, which is helpful because sometimes we think people are just being crazy. And we can't believe that they would possibly think that. But when we can come back to the fact that all of us on some level value all of these things, then when we see somebody emphasizing this one thing, it may not end the conflict that we're having, but at least we can go, okay, I can honor what it is that's really driving this for them, because that does matter to all of us. Does that make sense? Any thoughts on that? We've mentioned these 6 before. Anything as you hear that again?
I just remember hard conversations in COVID where some of these things
Yes.
were really heightened by that.
Yeah.
Safety or wherever that
Yes.
And exactly doing that, going, okay, one person, looking for the value that person's position is stated on.
Yes.
And how that makes difficult conversations easier.
Yeah, it doesn't make them go away necessarily, but at least it gives some framework for it sometimes. Any other? Yeah, Dean.
How did your mother react to Mrs. Hansen?
she was a little bewildered and not sure what to do. I used the crying technique on her a lot as well. So I don't know that she had any real answers, but yeah. Yeah, Becky.
Curmudgeon.
Yes.
I guess I'm seeing those and I'm thinking that any one of them, any group could use as a crutch, could be used as something to beat other people over the head.
Yes. Yes, I think that is really true. Yes, you can single out one and it becomes, and I think the antidote to that is really, well, it's kind of where we're going, but to recognize that all six have value. And here's why. Because, okay, so Jonathan Haidt, he would tell you he's an atheist. He is not out to promote any particular moral agenda here. He's not singling these out for advancing anything in particular, which I find actually really remarkable that these are what surfaced, because as I look at those as a Christian, I go, well, of course these are the innate values that are wired into us, because if you really think about it, all of these values are rooted directly into God's character. Each one has a corresponding aspect of who God is that gives us that desire for that, I think. God is love. So of course we want to be cared for and we want to care for people. God is a God of justice, the one who instills in us a desire for fairness. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. God is all about setting the captives free. And he's faithful. He will never betray us. He will never leave us or forsake us. He's the ultimate authority and Lord over all. And he is holy. There's no dark side to God. So he is sacred and full sanctity. And so I go, yes, of course, all of these values find their home in God himself. So that's why even 60 years ago, you have Dr. King saying, if we are to go forward, we must go back and rediscover those precious values, that all reality hinges on moral foundations and that all reality has spiritual control. It all goes back to who God is. That is, I think, what really gives power to the idea of these values. And to go, yeah, we can't just take one and beat people over the head with that one, because then that's taking out something else about God's character. So again, to Becky's point here, it's a little bit like we have a rain barrel with all these different slats in it. And if a couple of the slats are shorter than the others, then that's as high as the water can get, right? It can't rise all the way to the top because these two are lower. So if we're focused on just a few of those values and not paying attention to all the values, and we're trying to reflect who God is, then we're going to be limited in those areas because we're not able to show that fully. Does that make sense? So, to me, what this means is, as we think about values, our desire to think about them is not that we're not leaning in them to make people happy with church. Okay, because as I was saying at the beginning, all this dissatisfaction that we're seeing with church, we're not going to address values to try to somehow correct that situation and make people feel better about it. Really, we're leaning into it to better reflect God's character. We are here to bear witness to him. We're here to show who he is. And so that's why we care about values, because it's God's character and we're his people. Now, having said that, I'll go back to what I said 2 weeks ago, which was this, that our witness to the world isn't going to be through being a perfect church, but through how we deal with being a broken church. So it's not going to be that we're going to get all these 8 values perfect. We are human. We're going to strive for them. We're going to work toward them. But ultimately, we're not going to be able to fully do that. And the goal is not that we can't be a witness if we're not perfect, but to go, okay, how are we handling the fact that we are not perfect? I think that's what people wrestle with the church the most is us owning what about it is broken. So I want to think in that vein around one single verse out of Romans chapter 12, verse 9, where Paul says this. He says, love must be sincere. So thinking about our vision statement of living out of being loved, going, as we do that, love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to the good. Now, in the Greek, the grammar structure of that, really, it's like that first line is more of a heading than it is a full sentence on its own. So it's more a heading followed by two subpoints. So it would be saying, hypocrisy-free love looks like this: hating what is evil, holding fast to the good. So these things are demonstrating what that hypocrisy-free love, because really the word there in the Greek, it's not sincere, it's unhypocritical, meaning in the Greek language, hypocrite was the word for actor. So, somebody putting on a mask, putting on a front, putting on a show, and they're saying, you can't have that in loving people, which is really, think about how many times we say that we love somebody, but it's got an agenda to it, or it's got an artificial layer, or it's very shallow. And we go, love can't be that way. It's gotta go deeper. And this says first, it's interesting that the first little way to describe love is hating what is evil. And evil there, it's referring to the impact on people. So hurtful and burdensome and damaging and hating that. And I think part of us loving the world well, loving each other, is to acknowledge the values that we're not living up to and to hate the fact that that's true and the impact that that's having on other people. And we're not here to defend the reputation of the church. We're not here to somehow convince people that their ideas, their impressions that they have are completely wrong, but instead to go, you know what? We need to own that. Karl Barth said, only the love that is strong enough to abhor that which is evil can cleave to that which is good. We have to be able to own those pieces of what church looks like that have been damaging, and there have been a lot that have been damaging. And so part of being sincere in our love for people is to go, yep, what we're coming alongside you in that hate, in that grief, in that recognition that is not okay. And then holding fast to the good, I think that not only means holding fast to the good that is in ourselves, but to recognize the good in this person who is coming at us with hostility or enmity or disappointment or whatever. Instead of dismissing their concerns, go, the value that they are most pressed about, to recognize the good in that and to say, no, that is rooted in who God is. And your expression of it, I may disagree with where you're going with that value, but ultimately to hold on to the good that other person is bringing into the conversation, even when I'm in conflict with them, to go, I'm not going to let go of that. And I think those two things, if we're able to hold on, if we're able to own and just hate the failure that's there, or feel like we want to get rid of it, and yet not deny it, and then to hang on to the good in others. I think that goes a long way toward love being more sincere. Any reflections on that idea? Yeah, Becky.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I guess right now I see the argument in the world is what is exactly evil.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that is absolutely right. There is a lot of questioning of what evil is. That's probably a whole sermon or a series on its own. But no, I do think there is not going to necessarily be agreement in general on, but I do think when we do sometimes know when there's evil in our own midst, in terms of, if we think of it in terms of the impact and going, we can see where we're personally causing damage or burdening, and we may not have the full picture on evil, but we can begin there and go, yeah. Yes.
So I feel like, I think I resonate maybe with part of where you're coming from. You read that verse and it's like, hate what's evil, cling to what's good. It makes me want to come back mentally to that space of like, what's in, what's out, who's in and who's out. So I know who and what to hate and who and what to hold fast to. But I love where like the deeper conversation of it, because I think just like we can, like, when we're looking for the good and like can tie back to those values and see how it like connects us all to who God is, like the bigger picture of the good, like looking for God in people. I think it's for looking what's good, looking for the image of God in each human being is where we can hold fast to the good. And I think like on evil, instead of some, like the way you're talking about it, I think frees us up from having to determine what actions or which people we define as evil, and instead say, like on the flip side, evil is that which diminishes the image of God in each person. And I can hate where people have had the image of God diminished.
Yes.
I love that. That is so well said. Yeah, I think again, it gets back to that idea of impact. That going, I can absolutely hate the impact of evil, even if I can't fully define the cause. I can be very grieved and sad about how it's impacting. Yeah.
I'm just gonna give a quick example that my dear friend has a daughter who was working in retail, and she was helping these two young women, and they got into a conversation and found out that one of the young women was gonna have an abortion later that week. And all of our values are rooted in story, right? And so this daughter of my good friend was going to be aborted, but then her mom decided at the last minute to put her up for adoption. And so here's this young woman talking to this other woman who's considering an abortion, and her own mom was going to be that child. And she was a 22-year-old, so spacious, and not cutting her off. That's evil, you're evil, but just staying curious about it. Tell me, are you okay? Like, lots of compassion, not knowing her story. And then she said, can I ask permission to take you out to lunch and just tell you my story? And I think we want to, I was so admonished by this young woman who was able to have proximity to something that we can say, that never okay. But she's not saying, you're not okay. She's saying, you have a terrible story. Can I tell you mine? And not imagining that she should have control over this other person, but trusting the spirit that the relationship was the intervention. And that could be maybe more powerful than judgment.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, Nancy.
Yeah, this is kind of building on both Megan and Becky. For the first time, I changed my view or my understanding of hating what is evil. Because when I see a verse like that, I just think of some terrible things that terrible people do, we would never do, but the way you expressed it was, it sounds more personal to how I'm treating and thinking about other people. Hating that if it's not love.
Yes.
So I really appreciate that clarification.
Thank you.
Shifting off of position, right? So take a controversial topic like abortion. We're so rooted in position on that topic that we're doing exactly what Megan said. Instead of being able to see the imprint of God on someone we disagree with, we're diminishing that because we're so deeply rooted in a position. So shifting off of position and into what is diminishing the imprint of God in each of us.
That's good. That's really good. Yeah, Ron?
Yeah, I just think that when we try to enforce on society our values, we're not doing what the gospel says. To invite people to God who does change people.
Yeah.
Well, and again, the assumption being that we have it all figured out. And that's kind of, that's a little bit where I want to get to here next, is just kind of what is the value of values for us here. And I think part of it is, the first thing is just moral humility of going, even the person who I'm locked in conflict with has a value that I may not fully grasp the value of myself. And so to be humbled by the fact that we don't have all the answers, and then to be repentant where we have acted like we've got full clarity when maybe we don't, and to be able to hold the tension, because there are some of those values that you go, I don't know how to sit side by side with authority and liberty as two things that are both part of who God is, and I'm not fully able to reconcile those two things, but they are both there. And to go, that's okay. I don't have to. I need to hold on to them both, but I don't have to totally have it figured out, because ultimately Christ is the one who embodies all of them. And so that's where I go. Our values have the value of pointing us to Jesus as the one who alone embodies all of them entirely. Hebrews 1:3 says, the Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being. Christ contains all the values, all of them. And he when he was praying for his disciples in John 17, he said, I have revealed you, his Father, to them, to those whom you gave me out of this world. He completely revealed who God is. He alone is the one who can hold all of these well and do it perfectly. And so as I struggle with it, my job is not necessarily to somehow get it perfect so much as to be humbled by it, to have to go back to him and say, Jesus, I don't know how to do this. And to direct other people to him rather than to the church, in the sense of going, church can be broken, but Christ is not. And we can constantly usher people back his direction rather than trying to get them to look at us, because that's just going to be a disaster anyway. But also to go, they point us to Jesus in the sense that the other person also can point us to Christ. So much we think we're the ones doing the pointing. But to go, the fact that this person has a value that is not quite as high on my level, to sit with that and go, there is something to see of Jesus, even in the fact, I don't like the conclusion that they came to. I don't have to agree with them, but I can look for Christ even in what they are what they're bringing into, what their concern is, and go, I have something to learn there with that can point me to Jesus as well. The late Eugene Peterson wrote in one of his books about his growing up, and was saying that, when he was young, he was never picked for teams. He was the last person always, not very athletic. And he remembered this one occasion where there were these two teams fighting over him. And here's what he said. He said, the captains argued over who was going to have to choose me. Having me, I suddenly realized, was a liability. As the argument raged between them, I went from being a 0 to a minus. And then he said this, he said, but not with God. Before I was good for anything, God decided I was good for what he was doing. Here's what I think is maybe you have felt at odds with the church because you feel like the things you value are not what the church values. And you go, I'm a minus to the church. And I'm here to say you are not a 0 or a minus. God sees and knows what you care about, and he cares about it too. And so you are valuable. You are a valuable part of this church. I think one of the best things, you think about spiritual gifts and going, nobody has all the gifts. And that's part of the design that is collectively that we better represent Christ. And I think that is true for the values, that we each have different things that we value more, that it's only in combination that we really can see a greater picture of who God is. And so you are not a minus or a 0. And I want to encourage and challenge you too, to the people that you are engaged with in maybe a real heated conversation, to go, they're not a detraction from your following Jesus. They actually have something to add to that. Even if you vehemently disagree with them, that there are values that you can get to with them that help to show Christ.